Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Time now to turn to investor, entrepreneur, early crypto adopter, Karl Gray. Karl, welcome back.
Hi, Max. Great to be here.
We got met up a few years ago. We both had a love of crypto, a love of Bitcoin. We got involved with Start Join, Start Coin, and it's right in the name, Start. The idea is starting out, start stuff, attract talent. We met up with Joseph Thompson 2 years ago in Ireland. He had an idea, he had a dream. He came to us. He started something. It's become a monster. It's breaking out of the gates. It's a startup sensation called AidTech. Tell us about it.
Well, I've always had this belief that crypto could solve real world problems, right? This wasn't just another way to speculate and for everybody to get rich by somebody else losing money. Obviously, one of the ways in which Bitcoin has become a huge phenomenon was through its huge price point rise, and that's an early stage of any type of investment vehicle. But looking past that, this idea of the world's largest computer network, effectively, the ability to transmit information, whether it be remittance payments, communication, images, whatever, encrypted data, anywhere around the world, instantly for near free, is very, very powerful, and there's a lot of applications there, and we're just barely starting to see that happen. So when Joseph approached us, he said, hey, I've got a great idea in order to solve the humanitarian aid crisis around the world, particularly the refugee problem we're seeing now. Why don't we leverage blockchain technology? And we said, sounds interesting. Let us tell you about Start Join and how to get started and all of that. And things have just grown phenomenally from there.
So let's talk about that blockchain, because it was about a year or so ago that all the big banks, all the big four accounting firms around us, they all declared blockchain is great, Bitcoin, forget that cryptocurrency at half of it. Now, AidTech is actually using a blockchain or the blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain, and does it have a cryptocurrency aspect to it?
So this is what is fantastic about what they're doing. They do have a private blockchain in order to manage personal information and things like that, to have basically to be able to employ data security policies and best practices. Mm-hmm. But they then leverage this enormous Bitcoin network, which is the world's largest computer, effectively.
And thus the most secure.
And thus the most secure. And that, the entire private blockchain, then gets backed up to the Bitcoin network. So they're effectively leveraging the world's greatest data center for free, and then they can pass all that cost savings on.
So it's like a side chain on top of the blockchain, or it's riding on top of the Bitcoin blockchain?
They basically, once their transaction is complete, they back up every night to the Bitcoin network.
Right, so this is an area that was desperate for intermediation, disruption, if you will, the aid business. Right. He learned from the Clinton Foundation and other foundations that not a lot of the money that is earmarked for aid gets to where it's supposed to go. Here, if you're looking around the world, in Africa, for example, folks are on mobile phones. They're on cryptocurrencies. The blockchain is spreading all over the world globally, in ways that banks can't get there, and these other legacy systems can't get there. So am I correct in saying that AidTech will give transparency and accountability, and so for every dollar that is raised for aid, it gets to where it's supposed to go, and it's fully transparent, and it's real, right?
That's right. Transparency is the word here. So we know from a very reliable source, the UN's Ban Ki-moon, that 30% of the money that is spent in the humanitarian space is lost to fraud and inefficiency.
On average.
On average. And that total figure, the total every year, it's 1.2 trillion that's spent. So we're looking at over almost $400 billion that's just lost. The AidTech solution comes in and, using blockchain technology, provides a completely transparent view into all of that.
Well, Joseph is an entrepreneur, Thompson. He is the driving force behind this now, because we took this idea of bringing efficiencies, blockchain efficiencies, to, remember we were trying to get the mayoral election here in London. Right. We wanted to get one of the candidates on the blockchain and said you could save,
With the budget, you were going to put the budget.
Right. If you would save £100 million, £200 million on the budget using blockchain, and it was popular, but it's such an entrenched kind of mentality. They're not ready for that yet. But it takes an entrepreneur like Joseph Thompson, he brings the AidTech. Now you've got the UN. There's some news coming out of the UN, right? What's happening there?
So the UN Development Program is one of the world's largest humanitarian programs. And basically, they go around the world looking for projects, looking for areas that they can deploy funds in order to improve the lives of people in the developing world. They immediately approached us and said, we have been talking about blockchain. We realize we need to be able to deploy resources, whether it be cash, supplies, blankets, whatever, very, very quickly and be able to track all of that and the movement of it. So it's a huge logistics operation, and blockchain is the perfect vehicle for that.
So, I mean, you mentioned the UN and you mentioned the Clinton Foundation, and of course, they had a huge involvement. They basically organized all the Haitian earthquake relief efforts. I think 2 huts were built with the many billions raised. How, for example, would it look different if AidTech had sorted that out? How would it look different?
Well, it's actually great that you bring up Haiti. We're actually working with former president of Haiti, and he approached us and said, listen, we've got a lot of problems in Haiti, but they're not problems that can't be solved. We just need the right technology. And of course, with software, as AidTech's CTO always says, with software, anything's possible. And I like to say, well, with blockchain, anything is possible. So one of the big areas where they're falling down is this idea of cash remittance. So being able to get money into people's hands so that they can actually use it effectively and efficiently, and then so that the NGOs can track where this money is going. So it doesn't just go into a big black hole. Because, you know, aside from anything historical, sometimes it's just human inefficiency that causes the problems, the inability to track things.
Well, let me give you, see if you think like this analogy. So with Federal Express or UPS, I give them a package, they put in a barcode, they immediately put up a barcode.
Right.
And now that barcode is tracked through many, many, many handoffs. It goes to the driver, the truck driver, it goes to the airport, it goes into the plane, it flies over where it's supposed to go, comes off the plane, it goes on another truck. And every single step of the way, they're reading that barcode. Eventually, it gets to where it's supposed to go, and there's a sign, you signed for it, and it has delivered.
Right.
Now, with blockchain technology, an aid dollar comes with its own barcode. It's called a blockchain address, essentially.
Yep.
So now, as it goes from, you know, some donor who's maybe sitting in an apartment in Manhattan or somewhere in London, that contribution now, as it goes through the chain, distribution chain, every single step of the way, it gets that address is checked. So they know transparency. You can track it online. It's called the, you know, the blockchain. You can check. You can check it online. You can see where it's going, and then it arrives at its destination. And it hasn't been the cost of doing that. Unlike Federal Express, where the cost is pretty meaningful because you've got transportation costs and gas costs and all this other costs, the cost of moving this money from point A to point B is almost zero.
Yeah, and you can't defraud mathematics. I mean, that's what's so wonderful about the blockchain is it's immutable, it's corruption-proof, and so yeah, you can trace these funds. You can trace whether it's assets such as medicine, blankets, or cash. You can trace it from point of provision all the way to the beneficiary at the end point.
And I want to move on to some of the broader investment area. We're probably going to run out of time, so we're going to have you on for a second episode, but I want to just introduce the topic. You, I don't know if you raised any funds for AidTech in Silicon Valley, but I know you've been going to Silicon Valley quite a lot lately, and I wanted to know, there was a lot of VC interest in the whole crypto space a year or two ago. Has that dried up? Are they still interested, or is it all now about space exploration and driverless cars?
You know, in the Valley, VCs tend to chase shiny objects, in my experience. And so 2 years ago, Bitcoin was the biggest, shiniest object of them all. And of course, now we have, you know, automated cars and things like that. So there is a lot more competition. And also, aside from the speculative values of cryptocurrency, people have been struggling in a lot of cases to figure out, what are we going to do with this? What does it actually do? That's why I think AidTech is really exploding so quickly and to such amazing proportions, because it's actually a real-world application.
Well, it's an application, right? So it's over $1 trillion in aid.
Right.
30% gets lost.
Right.
So here you're reclaiming 30% of that using readily available technology.
Right.
You know, just snap it together, essentially, and now you've got hundreds of billions of dollars saved.
Yeah.
And they've now moved to London from Ireland.
Yeah.
And what's happening with now fintech here in London? This is one of the questions we wanted to get to, because as part of the Brexit, of course, there's a big question mark about how that will impact the fintech space. Obviously, in the case of AidTech, you're moving from the EU, as to say Ireland, to London. So clearly, the Brexit's not impacting you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big question, and it comes up quite often in conversation. But we live in such a small, interconnected world now that we just really haven't seen any huge inhibitions. There may be some regulatory problems down the road or some crossover questions, but we'll cross those bridges when we get to them. But so far, things are pretty smooth.